So now we are going to go inside the fashion system. This morning was about taking a look at the wider context, but now we're going to hold up a mirror to our industry, which is transforming before our very eyes. I'm thrilled to welcome our first speaker for this session. Dame Ellen MacArthur made yachting history in 2005 when she became the fastest solo sailor to circumnavigate the globe. Having become aware of the finite nature of natural resources, she launched the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in 2010. The foundation works with education, business, and government to support the transition to a regenerative circular economy. And yesterday, the foundation released a brand new report on the economy revealing that textiles revealing that less than 1% of material used to make clothing is recycled into new clothing, and that more than half of fast fashion produced is disposed of in less than a year. So how should we as an industry be responding and reacting to this change? How should we be changing our actions? Please have your questions ready at the end of Ellen's session, because we'll have a moment to also do a Q&A with her. So without further ado, please welcome Ellen MacArthur.
First of all, I never, ever thought that I would be standing here. Because as a child, from the age of 4, all I ever wanted to do was go sailing. My dream was to somehow sail around the world. So imagine how it felt for a girl who grew up as far from the sea as you can get in this country to be sitting in front of a man in a boardroom just 4 years after leaving school, with him having the opportunity, the decision to say yes or no. Luckily, he said yes, and that led to the most amazing 8 years of sailing boats like this around the world. It was my absolute dream. The boat here in the picture is a very special one. I sailed her around the world in 2005, and that was the boat on which I became the fastest person ever to sail solo non-stop around the world. And it was absolutely incredible. It takes you into a completely different space. You leave, you cross the start line, you probably won't see land at all until you cross the finish line, just over 70 days later. You sail in the middle of the oceans, the Atlantic, you go down into the Southern Ocean. At times, you are 2,500 miles away from the nearest town. The closest people to you are those manning the European Space Station above. You really are in the middle of nowhere. And these boats are pretty out there. That boat was so big that I could climb inside that mast all the way to the top. She was 75 feet long, 60 foot wide. She was a real beast. And it's hard to describe what it's like sailing one of these boats. They are just awesome. They are so powerful. But it's a bit like living on adrenaline, living on your nerves. You know, if you try and sail one of these things, you are white-knuckle sailing. If you're driving a car at 10 miles an hour, take it kilometers an hour, 30, 40, 50, it's not that stressful. Take that to 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. You're gripping that wheel with white knuckles, and you're doing everything you can to keep that car on the road. You're full of life. Then take that car off-road. Remove the windscreen wipers, of course, the headlights. You're off-road. It's even harder to keep that car the right way up because you're traveling so quickly. That's what it's like on one of these, day and night, 24/7. You have to sail the boat as fast as possible in order to break the record around the world. And now think of the preparation for that. You're going to sea for over 70 days. If I said to you all now, go off into the nearest town, Oxford, Banbury, and you find everything you need for your survival for the next month, 2 months, let's say 70 days. That's food, that's fuel, that's medical equipment, toothpaste, spare clothes. And you have to take the minimum because you're trying to be fast. If that boat's too heavy, it will actually break. It needs to be light to be fast, to be safe. It's a massive, massive thing to do. And that's what we do when we sail around the world. And that's what brought me here to this stage. Not the sailing, per se, but that understanding what finite means. When you're 2,500 miles away from the nearest town, and what you have on that boat is all you have, you really understand what finite means. What we have is all we have, there is no more. And I translated that understanding of finite that, to be frank, I was never looking for, to our global economy. And I began to realize our global economy is in fact no different from that boat. We have finite materials available to us, really once in the history of humanity. And yet when I began to learn about these materials, when I began to try to understand what our global economy looks like, I thought there was a magic answer. I thought there were loads of materials. When you dig into it, actually, there really aren't. Oil is not going to last forever. We don't know exactly how long, but it won't be around forever. Metals, polymers, all of these things that we feed into our economy, they won't be around forever. And I thought there were magic solutions out there when I first thought of this, first time outside of my headspace of sailing. But when I talked to people about solutions, the solutions were about using less. The solutions were making a garment with less material, making a car with less material, using a little bit less energy to do that. And of course, if you have finite materials, you are very careful with how you use them, once you realize that fact. But just using less is not a solution. It buys you time. What fascinated me was, what does success look like for the global economy? If we've got finite resources and we're using them up, that's not really very sexy. What actually really could work? And it was through talking to more experts, scientists, CEOs, as many people as I could, that the pin began to drop. What if we could build that economy in a circular rather than linear way? Linear takes something out of the ground, makes something out of it, throw it away. Circular, when you design that product, you take that material and you design that product to fit within a cycle. That cycle might be technical. It might use metals and plastics. So let's design it so we can get them out and feed them back into the economy again. What if it's biological? What if it's cotton? Or what if it's wood? Or what if it's food? Well, design that so those materials can fit within that cycle. And suddenly, my fear of what will the future look like turned into the biggest opportunity I had ever laid eyes on. There is a way whereby we can run our global economy in a restorative and regenerative way. We can switch from linear to circular, and we can build it so it really can run in the long term. And I'd like to put up the butterfly diagram, which we generated with the foundation to try to understand the circular economy in more detail. And you may think the circular economy, it's all about recycling. That's not true. Because when you look at this diagram, you have biological on the left, anything that biodegrades. On the right, you have technical, that's plastics and polymers. The most value, economic value, which by this stage we'd worked out was billions of US dollars, 500 billion US dollars for the fashion industry. A lot of the value lies on the inner loops. If you can resell the same product, if you can provide it as a service, if you can remanufacture, if you can decomponentize, and then when it's no longer the right thing to have or technology's moved on, you've designed it so you can get out those materials and feed them into the next pair of socks or the next iPhone. You're building for a system that can run in the long term. It was the most exciting thing that I'd ever come across. And, we call that the butterfly diagram. And I'd like to think of a butterfly as being beautiful. And I think, the fashion industry is very much about beauty, the most gorgeous garments presented in the most outrageous and thought-provoking ways. But is it beautiful if 73% of 53 million tons of garments produced every year end up in landfill or incinerated? Is that a beautiful system? What about the innovation and the creativity to design garments in ways whereby they can be provided to the customer in a different way, but they can be designed in a way whereby the raw material that sits within them is valuable at the end of their life, either as a garment resold, a garment shared, or a garment which is deconstructed and fed back into that system? And on this journey of understanding circular economy, we've looked at many, many different areas of the global economy: automotive, medium complexity goods, fast-moving consumer goods. The latest study we've done to try and understand the industry is fashion. And we launched this report just 2 days ago in London. Stella McCartney was there as the voice of fashion from our perspective, who really understands that industry. And now what's really interesting is what we learned. We did not know the numbers about the fashion industry. But as I said, 53 million tons, 73% ends up landfilled or incinerated. An industry which in the last 15 years has seen the volume of garments double, yet we wear them a third less. We found out that the CO2 emitted by the industry today is more than all international flights and maritime shipping combined. And yet, look at China. It's going to double in the next 10 years. So we have finite resources we're feeding into a linear industry in really not a very clever way. What we've outlined in this report is what success could look like for that industry if it's designed in a restorative and regenerative way. If you, when you build a piece of fabric, for example, you create textiles, design it in a way whereby it fits to a cycle. This is Rona Climatex. That fabric is designed to be entirely non-toxic, completely biodegradable. You could actually eat it if you felt like it, though it probably isn't designed to taste too good. Sure, that could be fixed. But if fibers leak out of this, and this report showed 500,000 tons of microfibers leach out of the washing systems of the world every year. That's plastic into the oceans. We don't know the implications of that. If you design a fabric like this in the biocycle, if the fibers leach out, it's no big deal. It's designed for the biocycle. It's going to end up going into the rivers, but it's non-toxic, it's biodegradable. What if it's plastics? What if you need plastic in your item, in your garment? Design it out of a material that can feed back into the system. Think about what your garments are designed out of so we really can build the most beautiful fashion industry. Not just beautiful on the catwalk, not just beautiful on all the individuals who are lucky enough to have those items, but also beautiful in the wider sense. Beautiful so it really can resonate across the world and show other industries just what is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. The concept of circular economy is so appealing to me. But as you have leaders of the fashion industry in the room, as you think about the first steps that a CEO or a designer or someone running their own fashion business can take, what are the first steps? Where do we start?
Well, there are two elements to this. The first is, how do you actually fix this? And we felt very strongly that there were 4 specific points. One is to phase out substances of concern, so toxins, from the dyeing process, from the manufacturing process, or if they're in the manufacturing process, make sure they stay enclosed within the units. And also inhibit microfiber release. That was number 1. The second one was to increase utility of garments. We have companies like Y Closet in China, 5 million users. You pay per month, you have an app and you get whatever clothing you want.
So it's a rental
model. It's
a
rental model, like Real is second-hand clothing. Rent the Runway in the US, valued at $1 billion. That's one element. So increase the utility of the clothing. It doesn't have to be a rental model, but how can you build something that has that value for longer? The third is to look at the design of the clothing. So what are you putting into the clothing? How is the clothing constructed? Design it in a way so you can really radically increase recycling, increasing the ambition. And the fourth element is also really important. What inputs go into that? So not just how can you recycle that material, but what are you actually feeding into the industry? Are there new textiles made out of viscose, for example, or from wood pulp, or from reconstituted cotton? There are many innovations out there. What do you feed into the system to make it work? And what lies above all those 4 is the vision of where we're trying to get to, because there's some amazing stuff going on within the fashion industry, innovation, sustainability, but paint that picture of what does success look like for all of us. Raise the level of ambition so we get way past 1% of textile recycled into textiles, which is tiny. And then the third one is collaboration like we have never seen before. Because if we don't work together to make this happen, if we don't collect those feedstocks together, if we can't put that material that we collectively choose going into the industry together, if we can't all work together on these solutions, then we won't have the economies of scale. So that's absolutely vital.
Okay. We have a few minutes now. If anyone has questions from the audience, just raise your hand. We have a couple of microphones on either side of the room. There's one question right in the back there, Simon. And if there's another question, raise your hand and we'll make sure that a microphone comes to you.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I was wondering, when we talk about sustainability and we talk about kind of fast fashion and maybe eradicating this fast fashion model from the industry, one of the things that comes up is economic privilege, right? Mm-hmm. How do poor people then buy clothes, right? Mm-hmm. I was just wondering if this has been any part of your study or any part of the consideration that you could shed some light on.
I think that's a really good point. And the economic side of the circular economy is something that we've been looking at, from the beginning intensively. I think in building a restorative and regenerative system, you're not just changing the design of a product, but you're also changing the business models. And we're used to buying clothing. That's what we do. We buy clothes. But we're seeing new business models emerge whereby you often don't buy the clothing. With Y Closet in China, you don't buy it. When you finish with that garment, it goes back into the system. And these organizations, they tend to have different tariffs. So you can have a certain number of garments a month, or more a month, or higher value garments every month. There are many, many different tariffs that can enable this. And I think in the poorer countries, not just the business model that could enable this, because there could be a really low tariff to have basic clothes to wear, but also what they're designed out of. Because if you end up with a piece of clothing which maybe you do buy, and it's designed so it's a biological nutrient, maybe your T-shirt ends up growing your vegetables in the future, or your corn, or your feedstock. So I think there are many questions we need to answer. We don't have all of them. We do know that an organic cotton non-toxic T-shirt costs between $7 and $9. It's a lot to some people, a huge amount, but we're not talking about hundreds of dollars. And we're only just beginning. Fast fashion works because of economies of scale. Some of these new innovations, when they scale, they really can work.
There's a question in the front from Julie.
Thanks, Ellen. You're so inspiring, especially right now, and thank you for being a leader in that. First question, where do you get the report? So everybody knows where they can get it. And second, you launched the report just recently, and you talked about the new textile economy, and you talked about the profitability in business and the new business there. And I think that's actually one of the things we've discussed a lot, is how you can use new business and profits as incentive for doing some of these things. So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
We looked at the value in a circular textiles economy, and we called it the future of fashion. A new textiles economy redesigning fashion's future. It's really the future of the economy, because a linear economy can't work. Doesn't matter if you're in fashion or automotive or plastic packaging, it can't run in the long term. And the trajectory of fashion is really not great. So what's the economic benefit to shifting? And that's one of the biggest questions we asked in this report. And we believe $500 billion worth of economic opportunity is there, because we don't utilize fashion or fashion clothing textiles at a high enough level. $100 billion worth of economic opportunity in the raw materials themselves. If we can feed those back in and we can recycle that material, that's a massive amount of value to be captured. And the new business models we've seen, I've mentioned many of them. There are new business models springing up. Baby clothing in Denmark that you rent. A baby wears clothing for a few weeks and then no longer. And we all pass it on. It is actually fairly circular in some ways, but is it designed in that way? Is it designed not using toxins? Is it designed so actually perhaps it's higher quality and it can cycle many times? Or maybe it's something that has to be virtually disposable, but once it goes back to the manufacturer, they know what to do with it. So I think we see these business models across the world, and 5 million users for Y Closet in China. That's big, and that's in 2 years.
So the report can be downloaded where?
The most important question. EllenMacArthurFoundation.org. You'll see all our reports there, the most recent of which is the new textiles economy.
Thank you, Ellen.
All downloadable. Thank you.
Thank you so much.